Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we are playing with the Whale Done stamp set and actually the whole bundle with this really fun little, I'm trying to not to blind you too much with the reflection there, with the fun whale punch as well. So I did make this card though that did not need the whale punch, though I did use the 2 and the 2 1/4 circle punches here. But if you had the dies, for example, the stitch shaped dies, you could totally use those in this case instead if you didn't have these punches. But this card here I've made where it's actually a nice little belly band here. And then this actually, this sea turtle here I have cut out by hand, but notice the two different tones of color. Let me zoom in a little bit. I actually sponged that on. So this is an example of a card that's not necessarily much more difficult, it just uses a few more components. I used the DSP from this bundle. It is called Whale of a Time. So there were lots of different sheets in here. I showed those when I first did my unboxing, and then when you open it up, I used this Just Jade color here, which goes really well with the pretty peacock that I chose for the actual card base and the belly band. And then I did the same kind of thing here. It was a little bit heavier handed on the ink, but I think that still worked really well. So this is the card we're making today, but I thought we changed it up just a smidge, right? Just to show you guys the variety of ways you can make this card. So first things first, let me show you the color we're going to use. This time I wanted us to use the actual whale punch. So we're actually going to use Calypso Coral, and we are going to use this piece right here because I liked this coral right here and that it kind of played over here as well, and I thought that that might make a nice little contrast with the ocean. So let me show you first how to prepare your card base. So this is a regular sized card base. It is 8.5 by 5.5, but instead of scoring it down the middle, you'll actually score it at 2 1/8 on both sides. So I'm just going to bring in my cutting tool here, my paper trimmer, because it also has this beautiful scoring blade right here. And this blade I think does a really good job at scoring in a nice deep way without it damaging your paper. And I've actually used it occasionally if I have to prepare a lot of cards at one time. I can actually put 2 sheets of paper and usually I can still see the impression on the second piece of cardstock. So go ahead and emboss, go ahead and add your crease here using your score tool at 2 1/8 on both sides. So essentially it'll be 2 1/8 and then add 4 1/4 to that. And I'll put this on my blog so you know exactly the dimensions at which you need to actually bend this. So on this piece I chose, I think it really, this happens to be 10.5 inches. You really don't need it to be that long or short. You could probably have it, as long as you have it at least 10 inches, this piece would be fine. So the first thing I did is I scored it at about 3 inches. And then here's the thing. So whatever you score next, like wherever this first score is, which 3 inches is pretty good, make sure that your next mark is going to be at least a little bit more than 4 1/4 long, because this is going to fold around your card, and if it's not scored a little bit larger than 4 1/4, when you try to put it on your card it just won't fit. So go ahead. So notice here I have my 4 1/4 here, so luckily I can just line it up with this mark. And so in this case I know that it's this line right here, and I'm just going to tilt it over a little bit to a little bit more than that. So then I'll score that again. And so now let me show you what we get when you do that. So let's go ahead, use my bone folder here to add the creases for my card. And assuming you've done your gatefold here properly, you'll find that you actually won't have them overlap too much, or at all in this case. So now on this side you'll do the same thing. add your creases. And you definitely want to try it out before you actually finish everything, because that would be like the worst thing if your belly band's like ready to go, but then it won't fit. So in this case, go ahead and you're trying to slide it down and it looks like it's a little snug, but that's a-okay. That'll fit. And actually I might actually swap it like that so it's a little bit more, it looks a little bit shorter there. So this would be a good length here. The 10.5 inches would be good. If you used 11, it would be a little bit longer here, so that's fine too. You could always just cut off the extra if you'd like. So let's go ahead and show you how we added the pattern pieces here. So these two pieces of paper actually came from one strip. So like this is the next piece here, as right here, and then this piece came from on top. So you still have plenty of paper to play with for the actual card. So to cut this, let's get our paper trimmer back. You actually need to make your cut in order to get it. If you wanted to save that strip, for example, you could just cut it right here at 3 3/4. You have this whole piece left behind, but keep that, you're going to need it. And then 5 1/4 here. And then you're going to cut that right in half, and it should be 1 7/8 for each piece, because your panels here are going to be, let me show you when you go ahead and do that, see, nice and even dimensions on every side there. So let's go ahead and adhere those down. We're actually going to use, and notice the back side is just these like lovely little fish things. And I love that. So let's go ahead and use my glue here. Notice you don't really need too much. I do try to go sort of lightly, but all up to the corners, because I have found in the past that like if I'm not very, if I'm a little too scarce in the corners, then it just ends up looking worse because the paper sometimes will peel off because I wasn't generous enough with my glue. So there's that. Oops, hello. There we go. So with that, I've got my card base almost ready. So the only thing I'm missing, right, is the inside, but I can get to that when I'm getting my stamping done. So next things to do, I actually chose for this card, I used the Granny Apple Green, which corresponded with this lighter green here in the seaweed here, but I thought, or the kelp, and I thought I would actually use the pretty peacock that's found right here and in some of this coral. I thought it would help tie in what I intend to color the whale with. So for this, you need your larger of the two punches for your circle punches. So the 2 1/4 inch circle punch, you just push that little lock up. This is just a scrap, so it really doesn't matter. You could, I mean, as long as your scrap is at least, 2.5 by 2.5, right, you'll get your punch out. I try to punch mine in a corner, so I have got the most amount of space here to use as a scrap for something else. So here's one of the things I'm actually going to do differently this time. I thought it would be fun, since here's my 2-inch circle punch. This piece is actually larger than 2 inches, so I thought I would actually use it as a background right here as my bubbles to superimpose my whale on top of that, rather than doing my stamp imaging that I did on my previous card. So here I actually stamped using multiple colors, but I thought this one would be kind of fun. Plus, on the background here, it kind of would blend in really well. So let's go ahead and glue that down, and you'll see. And it helps tie in all those colors, because this particular piece of paper has a lot of colors on it, and so I think that that's really fun. So that piece, whoops, I just threw my little scrap down on the paper on the ground. So we'll put that on top once we get to that point. So now let's stamp our inside piece and our whale. So this is just a scrap for my whale. I don't think I have it already mounted. Let's do that. So in your stamp set, the whale is right here. And put it on a block. There we go. And remember, because this is photopolymer, you do want to have your Stampin' Pierce mat or a foam mat of some sort underneath to add a little cushion to your stamping. So what I chose to do with my whale, I will do the same thing I did with my sea turtle, but I'm actually going to flip it. So with my whale, I'm going to put the Just Jade, because over here, oh well, I guess it's not really the flipping, it's going to be about the same. So Just Jade was the flippers, and the Pretty Peacock was the shell. Here I'll keep the pattern the same, but obviously the design will be different. So I'm going to use the Pretty Peacock on the top side of the whale and the Just Jade on the bottom. And we'll see what that looks like. I haven't done this ahead of time, so that'll be fun. So you just take your ink dauber, your sponge dauber here, and then you just tap, 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 tap all over on your stamp where you want your color. Normally, you'd probably want to do your light color first. I was just too eager to get to my color here. I really do like this Pretty Peacock color. So notice that you should be dabbing rather than like trying to sponge it on with like a brush kind of a stroke, because if you do it with your it'll end up looking kind of weird when you try to stamp it off. So I'm just gonna nice and gentle here. Here we go. Let's see. Worst case, if I don't like it, I can just redo it. So because you've left the ink on for a minute, go ahead and just breathe on it for a second, just to make sure that it's re-inked in case you took a little long to ink it up. Let's see what that looks like. That looks pretty good. So go ahead and you'll see you've got a little detail, I went a little heavy, but I think it's still gonna work out just fine. So I can just punch that out, push that up. This card's a little bit punch heavy, but it's still really fun. There we go. There we go. This one punches out a lot of other pieces, because you can actually make a whale from all of these pieces without having to actually have the whale stamp if you really didn't want it. So that's really nice too. So there's that. My whale is done, but I'm actually, while I still have it out, I'm actually going to add a whale on the inside like I added the sea turtle on the inside of this one. This time I'll do it the right way. I'll add the Just Jade first, the lighter color. I am going a little heavy here. It's also surprisingly humid here, so I think that's not helping either. So probably should have sponged it off a little color first. That's okay. Worst case, I could just flip my paper over. So let's put my little whale right here. Hey, that looks actually, I think, even better than the previous one, so fantastic. So now there's that. Let's add our sentiment. So I've decided to do, and I don't know if you can tell, that one says, you're kind of a big deal. So this is another one where if you wanted to, you could absolutely sponge it like an ombre look, and I think I'm actually going to do that. Let's see how that works out. I haven't actually used the stamp yet, so sometimes it'll take a little bit of conditioning before it'll stamp properly. So we can definitely play around with that. Alright, well, if you heard that jingle, that's two of my cats are playing with one another. Boo, 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 boo. There we go. Alright, so just dabbing it on there. So let's go ahead, little breath, and there we go. Isn't that fun? So I could have definitely made my Pretty Peacock end a little bit earlier to kind of show the ombre look a little bit better, but I kind of like that. So let's go ahead and wrap up the card, because we're pretty much done at this point. It's just kind of assembling the rest. So let's go ahead and move this out of our way, move this out of our way, and get our components back. So let's go ahead and adhere this to the inside piece here. Again, I'm just going to use my Tombow liquid adhesive, kind of going into the corners, but not too thick here with the glue. And then just going ahead, I use kind of the palm of my hands, although I have had to like check it for ink before because I have definitely ruined a project or two because of that. So next, before you actually adhere these pieces, you want to have your belly band around the card first, and then you want to make sure, okay, yep, it lines up properly. And for this, I actually used the new Stampin' Up! Seal Plus because I really didn't want my band here to be damaged. So I just down and this is the one thing, they don't need you to do the check mark anymore. That you needed to do if you ever had the fast fuse, but it does mean that occasionally you have to like pull it up a little bit. So go ahead, and in your case you may also want to make sure that it will not show over here on this side, so do make sure that you've kind of measured that out. You could even use a little pencil and make a mark so as to not have it go over. So here I'm going to just adhere it right down, same thing. Because I don't have stamped directions, in terms of like stamped images that are directional, I can actually just put the glue, as long as it's straight on here, I can put it wherever. And then just make sure that's nice and center. And go ahead and adhere it down. And then I'm actually going to pop up that whale with a dimensional, or well, a couple dimensionals. So 1, 2, and notice here, normally you might put one on the tail, but if I put one on the tail, it'll kind of go off the circle piece, so I'm actually just going to put 2 for this one. Boop. So just have them nice and centered. There we go. And with that, that is a pretty simple, I mean, it's a little bit more time consuming than some really simple stamping cards, but otherwise I really like the variety that you can do. You can also, I could have easily added a touch of ribbon or something behind these circles. I could have used different shapes. I could have made the belly band larger. This belly band each of them were 1.5 inches in terms of size, because I knew I wanted to use just a circle. If I had wanted to use like a bigger panel for part of my belly band, a larger band may have been more appropriate. So with that, all of the instructions for how to make these, as well as a link with all of the items I used to make them, will be found below on my YouTube post, as well as on my blog, with clickable links if you need to actually add any of these items to your next order. If you wish to make a purchase with me and earn rewards through me, you can use this host code when you sign, when you finish checking out with your purchase. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to let me know. Leave a comment below which one you like better. I'm actually going to try something a little new. Any person who comments, I am going to mail these to you if you wish. If this one is your favorite, the first person who comments on it, I will get in touch with you, and you can leave me your address and I'll send it to you. And same thing for this one here. If this one's your favorite, feel free to message me and I will send it your way. So if you need anything, let me know. Leave a comment. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you can see the next things I create. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!